What's up, motherfishes? May the 4th be with you. And the 5th, happy Cinco de Mayo. And the 6th and the 7th. You know what? Hopefully you guys are having a great week. I had a great week. I went up to Lake Arrowhead for a few days and hanged out with the homies, shooting some pool, great views, playing some poker, drinks, and it was awesome. Came back and went to go see an Iron Maiden cover band, which was freaking awesome as well. They're called Maiden USA. If you guys are into that kind of music, I definitely suggest you guys check them out. They're really good. And ended up the week with a Dodgers game. Go Blue. It was great. It was dollar hot dogs, so I must have ate billions and billions and billions and billions. But enough about that. Let's go ahead and get to our poker hands. Our first hand of the night is going to get dedicated to one of our subscribers named Will Holland. He leaves me a message in the comments asking me if I can play his favorite hand, 6 deuce. And well, I'm not sure why such a shitty hand is his favorite hand. But if we are going to play a shitty hand, we might as well play it like we got aces, right? So I go ahead and put out 500 out there. And our opponent in the small blind goes ahead and calls. And we got another opponent in middle position that calls. And we are 3 ways to a flop. The flop is King, Queen, 6. We flop bottom pair with not the best kicker of all. And our opponent in small blind goes ahead and checks. Our opponent in middle position checks as well. And it's up to us to fire a continuation bet of 600. Our friend over here in the calling station pays us off and middle position gets out of the way and we're heads up to a turn. The turn is a 7. And our opponent goes from being a calling station to being a donk station because he leads out for 1,000 and we go ahead and pay that off. The river comes and it's a 7. Our opponent all of a sudden hates this 7 because he checks it and we check it back and our 6s are good. I could have probably gone for some thin value because I had a pretty good read on him, but I would have had to let it go if he would have repopped us and I wouldn't have been able to dedicate this hand to our new friend Will. A few orbits later, I'm somewhere down in middle position and I look down at King 10 suited. It folds around back to me and I go ahead and pop it up to 200 and we get 3 callers. We get the hijack to call, we get the cutoff to call, and we also get the button to call, and we are 4 ways to a flop. The flop is Ace 8-10. And not only is there a stupid ace out there, but I'm out of position against 3 other players. I am the original raiser, so I go ahead and continue with my story, and I fire off 300. Our opponent in the hijack goes ahead and reaches for chips and re-raises me to 600, causing the cutoff to fold and causing the big blind to fold. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and call because I'm getting such a great price. The turn card is a 6. I slow down and check, and surprisingly, our opponent checks back. And we get to see a free river. The river is a 10. I go ahead and check one last time and our opponent goes on and fires off a bet of 1,200. Now I go ahead and just flat call. I know that I could have re-raised them and gotten more value off my hand, but if I re-raise him and he shoves, I'm gonna have to fold. I'm not gonna be able to call an all-in, and I'm happy with the amount of value I got off of this hand. He flipped over Ace 3 and we dodged a lot of bullets. In this next hand, I look down at Jack 4 suited. And I'm not a big fan of this hand, but I am on the button and 3 other players limp behind me. So I go ahead and limp as well. Our small blind goes ahead and calls the remainder 50 and our opponent in the big blind goes ahead and checks and we're 6 ways to a flop. The flop is 7-3-9. Not only do we flop a flush draw, but we also flop a backdoor straight draw. And we're in position against 5 other players. And our opponent in the small blind checks, our opponent in the big blind checks, and our opponent that follows goes ahead and fires off 600. One opponent in the late position calls, and I call on the button, and we are 3 ways to a turn. The turn is a great card for us. We go ahead and make our flush with the queen high, and our original aggressor reaches for chips and fires off a bet of 1,500. Our opponent in late position goes ahead and takes a glance at his cards one last time before he lets them go. Comes back around to me and I go ahead and do a smooth call and we are heads up to a river. The river is a bad card for us. It's another spade. And our opponent goes for firing 600 on the flop, 1,500 on the turn to super downsizing of 500 on the river. I go ahead and re-raise him to 2,000 and he snap calls. He turns over a queen that he hit on the turn, and he made a 10 high flush on the river, and we take this one down. In this next hand, I go ahead and look down at ace deuce suited, is somewhere in mid position. I go ahead and fire up 325 chips, and our opponent in late position folds. Well, both of them fold, and once it gets back to the button, he reaches for chips, and he makes the call. Our opponent in the small blind makes the call, and we got two other opponents that follow that make the call, and we are 5 ways to a flop. The flop is a great flop for us. We flop the second nuts. And now our opponent in small blind goes ahead and checks. Our opponent in early position goes ahead and fires off 500. We get this person to call. I call, obviously, and our opponent in the button calls. And our opponent in the small blind goes ahead and lets it go, and we are now 4 ways to a turn. The turn card is a jack, and our opponent in early position goes ahead and fires off 500. Another early position player goes ahead and calls, and it comes back around to me, and I go ahead and bump it up to 1500. Our opponent in the button goes ahead and reaches for chips and makes the call. And our original donk aggressor that fired off 500 goes on and lets it go, but our opponent that followed doesn't let it go, and she pays off, and we are 3 ways to a river. The river is a deuce. Our opponent in early position now goes ahead and checks. It comes back around to me, and I go ahead and fire off a bet of 3,000. Our opponent in the calling station over there goes ahead and pays us off, and we are good. In this next hand, I look down at Jack 10 offsuit in the small blind. Our opponent on the big blind goes ahead and folds without realizing he's big blind, but his cards didn't touch the mug, so we let him take it back. But it is a sign of weakness. Our UTG1 calls, UTG2 calls, and another dude in late position calls. Comes back around to me, I fire 1600, and UTG1 calls, UTG2 calls, and our other opponent calls as well, and we are 4 ways to a flop. The flop is a great flop for us. It's 10, 8, 10. We go ahead and flop trips, and we go ahead and lead out with aggression. We put out 4,000 out there. Our opponents that follow goes ahead and folds, except for this guy over here who makes the call, and we're heads up to a turn. Just when we thought our hand couldn't get any better, bam, we fill up on the turn. We put out another 4,000 out there, and our opponent goes all in for another 4,000 on top of that, and we show him the bad news. Even worse news for him, because he goes ahead and flips over 10-8. He flopped a full house, and just to his bad luck, he ran into a bigger full house on the turn. And, wow, the river's irrelevant, but man, what a massive cooler. I go ahead and take all of his chips and his bounty. Buuuyaaaaaaoooooo! Our good streak continues when we look down at pocket fours in mid position. We go ahead and bump it up to 3,000, and everybody folds except to our player on the right. She already had 1,000 invested, and she goes all in for her remainder of her chips, which is 4,000 more. I go ahead and make the call. Obviously, there's only 2,000 more to me, and it's a bounty out there. So, of course, she flips over King Jack, and we are heads up all the way. The flop is a full freaking house for me. And she goes from nearly being dead on the flop to picking up 8 outs on the turn. Luckily though, none of those outs hit, and we take all her chips plus a bounty. Buuuyaaaaaaoooooo! For this next hand, I look down at 6, 7 suited. I'm on the big blind, and our opponent under the gun +1 goes ahead and limps in for 800. It folds around to everyone else, and it comes back around to me. And while I really like 6, 7 suited, but I did tell myself, Eric, you can't raise 6, 7 suited out of position. But screw that guy, I do it anyway. I reach for chips and I raise it up to 2,000. Our opponent in the under the gun +1 goes ahead and raises me. What the hell? He limp raised me. He puts out another 2,000 out there, and well, of course I make the call, and we're heads up to see a flop. The flop is Queen 6 deuce. We go ahead and hit middle pair on this board, and we lead out. We go ahead and bet out 3,500, and our opponent goes into the tank for about a minute or so before he announces he's all in. After the 3,500 in, he has about 12,000 left behind, and about 17,000 in the pot. This is where I start thinking of how stupid I played this hand. Not only was I not aware of his chip stack before we started the hand, but I bet out of position. I raised this hand out of position and he re-raised me. Right there and then I knew I was behind. I knew he had a pocket pair and I still managed to go ahead and lead out for 3,500 on the flop. So I let it go. It was a stupid way to play this hand. I knew I was beat. I probably should have just called just because of the amount of money that was in the pot. I could have hit another 6. I could have hit another 7. Or I could have hit a 7. But anyways, none of that happened. Till this day, I don't know what this player had. He won't tell me, but that's poker. We live, we learn, and we move on to the next hand. This last hand of the night, we're heads up. And I'm in it for 1,000, and I put in my other 1,000, and my opponent raises it to 5,000, and I fold. My opponent goes on and says, "Oh, that's what I thought. Ha 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 ha." So my plan was to get him back. And in this hand, I'm on the big blind, and my opponent has 1,000 in, and he puts in his remainder 1,000, and I go ahead and make it 7,000. This is where I thought I was gonna take the pot, but no. Our opponent's a fish, and he gives us a call, which I'm glad he did, because we flopped the absolute nuts. At this point, I hear the best words our opponent could say. "I'm all in," he says confidently. Of course, I'm not gonna fold. I call, he bricks out on the turn, and he bricks out on the river, and we take it down. Well, that's all she wrote, guys. I was able to take first place in this tournament. No chopping, which is a great sense of accomplishment, right? But I was able to take over $220 for the tournament and just a few more in bounties. Well, that's all the time I have for you guys today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and that subscribe button below. And well, if you guys have a shitty hand you guys want me to play, go ahead and leave me a comment in the comment section, and I might play it. If I do play your shitty hand, I'll go ahead and give you a shout out on the next video. And well, I'll see you guys later.